Canary by Cloud9 3/4. Chapter 41. Little secrets can have big values. 8 days since the return. It was the first day of a new term, and this was not where Midoriya expected to be at this point. He had just started getting used to it all, and now it had all changed again. It had now been, according to his calculations, around 24 days since he received this injury of his. He had finally come to the conclusion that he wasn't going to be a hero after all. That he'd made it through UA and come out the other side with the knowledge to become maybe a police officer or something. But now? Well, things had changed. Now Canary really was a hero in training. And what meant oh so much more to him was that he earned that title, not through the powerful quirk he'd become famous for. No, it was for his own skills. Quirkless! Mr. Aizawa said that he could be a hero without a quirk. And with this knowledge under his belt, that bubble of euphoria returned quickly to his self. Rising up in his chest, it was almost enough to make him burst! He had a hero license! He had a hero license! He had a hero license! The only negative thing to come out of the provisional licensing exam was Siren's injury. It didn't seem to faze her much, though. When she came back from the vets late that evening with Mr. Aizawa, a little bandage wrapped around her wing, those beady eyes radiated a fury that could not be held within such a tiny body, a look that villains should learn to fear. Midoriya thought it was funny. Mina said it would haunt her nightmares. Oh yeah, and another thing. Poor Todoroki didn't manage to earn his license. Then again, he was fighting with another student in the exam, so he kind of had it coming. But the mistakes he made were what resulted in Midoriya ultimately getting his hero license. So he wasn't complaining too much. And Kachan didn't get his license either. Midoriya wasn't quite sure how to feel about that. But people had noticed the sudden change in him, he could tell. Even the most unlikeliest of people had seen it. You're different now, Canary. Midoriya blinked at Eri. She stared back, tilting her head to one side, her green pen hovering a few inches from the paper that she'd been doodling Siren on, who posed dutifully before her. The two were sitting in the common room of Heights Alliance. It was lunchtime, and no one else was around. There was no way Midoriya was eating food in the lunch hall until he had his cheek fixed, at the very least. Often Shinso ate with him, and he hadn't been comfortable enough to let anyone else, despite Jiro's insistence. Uraraka too, but she was a little less pushy about it. It was kind of bugging Midoriya. Can't she just let him try and sort this out himself? Figure it all out in his own time? Maybe he was overthinking it all. She had stopped asking if they could all eat with him now. Stop being so clingy. He had to comprehend that, well, he had, in her point of view, died. Of course she's keen to be around him now that he's back. He came back from the dead. She wasn't the only one, though. Mina was just as insistent. And even people Midoriya didn't know so well, like Kaminari and Kirishima. Although Kirishima seemed really nice and knew when to back off. So that wasn't that much of an issue. We're acting a little clingy. Shinso seemed to get it, though. Consequently, Midoriya felt the most comfortable around him. It all just made him pretty angry, frustrated over what had happened. There were so many emotions going on at once that he wasn't really sure how to deal with it. He was happy that he was back, and he had a provisional hero license, and a real shot at a future he could look forward to. But it wasn't what he could have had. His voice, tantalizingly close, just out of reach. He couldn't wait for the week to be over, and he could finally get that surgery done. Removing the hole and fixing up this phantom tongue thing would really help with his speech therapy. At least, he hoped it would. And that was all he could do. Hope. Mr. Aizawa said you're going to be a prepper hero now, Eri continued. Midoriya had phased out a bit. He blinked as he was brought back to reality. I think you're already a prepper hero. Okay, now he's going to cry. Siren ruffled her feathers up with pride, like she'd raised Midoriya to be this way. But you seem happier now. And bouncy, she added, staring at the flowers she'd drawn. You smile lots, I think. But you still wear bandages. Eri gazed back up at him now, eyes scrutinizing the mask across his face. They don't help. Midoriya instinctively reached up to his hidden cheek. He wasn't actually wearing any bandages at all, but it was what she called the mask. In her point of view, it had a similar purpose, to cover up what he deemed unsightly. Does it still hurt? She asked, big red eyes full of worry. Midoriya shook his head frantically, waving his hands about with no meanings behind the motion. Then why do you wear them? Eri frowned, and then her little hand dropped the pen and reached up to his mask. Midoriya froze, staying perfectly still as she paused, inches from the fabric. She hesitated. Can I see? Would that be a good idea? Would it scare her, set her off? But would refusing compromise her trust? Was he overthinking this? Probably. The girl had been through hell, judging from the way she acted, flinching at every fast movement and the lack of a smile upon her face, no matter the situation. It was like she had forgotten how to feel, or perhaps never truly learned. But he was waiting too long, reading what emotions she did present, those glistening in her eyes. Midoriya realized she did need to understand. And so he nodded. Eri still wavered further before finally reaching forward to slip in fingers beneath the hem of the elastic fabric and slowly ease it off his jaw. Once his injury was on full display, Eri leaned back into her chair. There was no shock upon her expression, nor fear. She just looked on with childlike curiosity, lacking the innocence that belonged there. She sat there, staring at it, for a good few minutes. Then, to Midoriya's surprise, she reached up to her own mouth, pulling at the corner of her lips in an attempt to expose as much teeth as Midoriya couldn't help but do. With the forced cavity, she said, But you can talk like that. Midoriya laughed softly, smiling at her deductions. The smile didn't scare her either. So, confident it wouldn't frighten her, he leaned forward and opened his mouth, pointing at what was missing. Eri cocked her head to one side as she gazed inside. After a few minutes, she stuck her tongue out, holding it between her fingers, and tried her best to say, No tongue. Midoriya laughed again as he closed his mouth. She nodded like her experiments had been successful. It's hard to speak like that. Midoriya nodded in reply. They were quiet again for a while. Midoriya joined in on scribbling on her piece of paper. Eri just watched, but there was clearly something on her mind because soon she began to speak again. You smile lots. Midoriya hesitated, putting the pen down to give his undivided attention to the little girl. Well, not completely undivided. He always had an eye on Siren, although he was pretty sure she'd fallen asleep now due to the lack of interruptions. You're always smiling, Eri continued, fiddling with the ends of her sleeves nervously. You smile now when you're happy. But you smiled lots before, too. Even when you weren't. And when we were scared, when we run away, you smiled then, too. Why do you smile? He wavered. How could Midoriya possibly reply to that? To a girl who knew no sign language and couldn't read well? So he lifted his hands up to his face, pointing as he smiled as wide as he could, despite how bad he knew it looked at the corner of his cheek. Then he pointed back to Eri, poking at her cheeks too. He smiled so that she could smile. She seemed to understand, but then, mimicking Midoriya's movements, she lifted her hands to her face and pulled at her lips. She struggled like that for a moment whilst Midoriya looked on in confusion. She gave up quickly. Sorry, she sighed. How do you smile again? Midoriya stared for a moment, his own smile fading from his face. He pulled her into a hug, running his hands through Eri's long, pale hair. He'd just have to teach her how. Ida wasn't pleased that Midoriya was only 1 minute early to afternoon registration. Shinso was just pleased that his friend had decided to make his entrance as dramatic as possible by tossing the door open with a bang and giving them all a mock salute as he marched inside. Eri scurried in the classroom behind him with Siren cupped in her hands. The bird had her wings slightly open like she was flying along, despite the fact that she couldn't at the moment, whilst one was all bandaged up. As Midoriya sat down in the seat in front of Shinso, and Eri placed Siren carefully on top of his desk, Mr. Aizawa appeared, his sleeping bag slung over one shoulder. Shinso didn't see why all the teachers insisted on taking the register, especially since they could see that every desk was occupied, but he did it anyway. He was rather distracted by Eri, though. She'd hurried over to Yaoyorozu's desk behind Shinso's to show her a drawing that she'd pulled out of the pocket of her pinafore. Yaoyorozu was quietly complimenting her as the register reached their row.
Present,
Mr. Aizawa, she exclaimed in her usually excitable manner.
Katsuki Bakugo.
Hair, he droned, which was unlike him. Was he still pouting because he didn't get his hero license? Because if so, ha!
Izuku Midoriya.
Here! Shinso. And everyone else. Stern! Had he ever answered to his name on the register?
Etoshi Shinso. Yeah. And Momo Yaoyorozu.
Present, sir.
Great.
Mr. Aizawa sighed, completely ignoring the class's surprise about Midoriya speaking.
Your hero costumes are under maintenance after your professional licensing exam. Grab your PE kit. We're doing a different kind of hero training today.
Everyone else was mildly disappointed at the lack of hero costumes, or curious as to what Mr. Aizawa might have been talking about, but with this being the very first day of a new term, it had to sacrifice a lot of lessons that morning to Nezu's endless introductory assembly. It was expected for their curriculum to change a little bit. Well, Shinso didn't exactly have much experience in hero classes yet, but he certainly had more than Midoriya. Speaking of which, Midoriya's eyes were sparkling as his mind was cast towards attending his very first hero lesson as part of the class! Finally! Quirkless hero training. The very thought made Bakugo want to blow something up. Literally. And Deku's stupid face when he heard those words. Ugh! They had to choose partners to spar with at the beginning, so Bakugo chose Kirishima. Deku had been purposefully paired with Roundface, though. Apparently, Mr. Aizawa thought those two would both be at the top of the class. What the heck made him think that? Sure, Roundface did that martial arts thing for her internship. Freaking internships. But what the heck did Deku know? Kirishima thought he was too focused on them to pay attention to him. He was wrong. Bakugo dodged his punch and quickly retaliated with a big right hook which sent Kirishima flying across the mat. He groaned. Not being able to use our quirks sucks, was all Bakugo said in reply, trying to focus just on their training rather than the pestering thoughts that continued to plague the back of his mind. Mr. Aizawa had approached after seeing Kirishima being knocked to the ground. He helped him up.
Do that again, but in slow motion,
he instructed. Bakugo took a moment to actually do as he asked, because he was a little distracted by Deku's stupid little bird bandaged up and perched on his teacher's shoulder. Averting his eyes, he gritted his teeth in frustration as he took his fighting stance. He dodged Kirishima's mockingly slow punch and had to force himself to slow down in own.
Stop there,
their teacher insisted.
Kirishima, grab his wrist. No, a little further up. That's it. Remember that position. You're going to do it again, and this time twist his wrist harshly and use his own momentum against him. If that doesn't knock him over, twist your foot around his ankle to take out his balance. And so the two stepped back. Kirishima threw the first punch, but then Bakugo grabbed his wrist to his teacher's surprise and quickly brought him to the ground with a yelp. Mr. Aizawa blinked at them. I meant Kirishima do that to you. Not everything's a competition, Bakugo. You can learn through losing. I thought the provisional licensing exam would have taught you that much by now. Apparently not.
Bakugo, in frustration, cupped his hands to let off his explosive power. He found it calming sometimes. But with a flash of red, Mr. Aizawa stopped his quirk.
No quirks,
he snapped.
Everyone else seems to be managing it.
That just made Bakugo want to say something light even more. A few minutes later, and Bakugo was now the one on the ground, staring at the ceiling and stewing in his own feverish emotions. You alright, man? Kirishima questioned, holding out a hand to pull him up. Bakugo could tell by the tone of his voice that he wasn't referring to the rough and tumble of the exercise. I'm fine! Shut up! He hissed, but he took the hand anyway, not that he really needed it. Not at all. Hey, it's alright, you know? Kirishima continued, his voice clashing against the distant laughs of Uraraka and Deku in the background. A lot of stuff has happened to you. People kind of forget that with Midoriya around, but it's true. Shut up! I'm fine! Bakugo repeated, taking a fighting stance again. He lunged forward and Kirishima evaded. They threw punches and blocks like that for a while longer, lost in the motion of it all. Kind of like Deku's dancing. The thought was what resulted in Kirishima's fist making contact with the side of his face, knocking him to the ground. Oh, shoot, man! Kirishima exclaimed. That was a little harsh. Sorry. And now he was staring at the ceiling again. His vision was going all blurry. Damn this! Kirishima's hand was out again, but Bakugo didn't take it. I don't need your help! He lashed out. Kirishima flinched back. Bakugo was aware of the stares being thrown in his direction.
Okay, time to change partners,
Mr. Aizawa announced drearily. Seriously, if you ever need to talk, Kirishima started. Shut up! Was all Bakugo could say in reply. Okay. The lesson passed by quickly. He didn't really converse much with anyone else, just throwing punches and blocking, sometimes picking up a few tricks and using them against unsuspecting opponents. He got hit a few more times than he would have liked, though. Everyone else suspected he had just let them get him once or twice just to give them a chance. It wasn't the truth.
Alright, last switch,
sighed the teacher.
Move to the mat to your right.
So we did, focusing on the clock on the wall as they moved. 5 minutes left. Good. Then, what else do they have today? Just art and math, right? That doesn't require that much brain power.
Sir, can I move over another one?
That was Eyebags, who was on the mat next to Bakugo.
Just want to fight me?
Bakugo leered.
Wait your turn!
But then he looked up to see who he was against. Deku waved back feebly.
Bakugo turned to Mr. Aizawa. Sir, can I move over another one?
No, was his harsh reply. The bird gave an affirmative tweet, too. She looked so freaking superior that Bakugo just wanted to fry her. Eyebags gave him a look as he started his fight with Canary, who was going on about him not being good enough for Shinso. He got kicked in the stomach pretty promptly. Bakugo flexed the muscles in his hands as he turned his red-eyed gaze slowly over to Deku. He was doing a rather similar exercise, fiddling with his fingers nervously, but his returning glare was anything but meek. It was strange. He'd certainly changed since they were younger. Bakugo wasn't keen on it. He was also painfully aware that it wasn't only Shinso who continued to watch him from the corner of his eyes. Nearly every extra in the class cast a look in his direction every second or so. Mr. Aizawa did so too, but he didn't know that Bakugo's and Deku's relationship went back any further than the sports festival. Was that seriously the last time they properly communicated? No, of course not. There was Kamino, too, and everything that happened leading up to it. But no one really knew what had happened between them. There was what Shinso had wisely decided to spill. But that wasn't the whole story. It just wasn't. They weren't there. They didn't know the truth. They made it out to be so much worse than it actually was. Then again, Deku had no clue that any of this had happened. In his point of view, the only reason everyone was giving them strange looks lined up with what Mr. Aizawa knew. Bakugo watched and waited until eventually he saw Deku take his stance for a fight. And Bakugo didn't bother doing the same. He lunged forwards, and Deku dodged. It made his teeth grind, always dodging, never facing anything head-on, just dancing around his problems until they sorted themselves out. The charade continued mercilessly, just like always. It was annoying! Especially since Bakugo knew he was so much better than this. If he could just use his real power, he'd blow Deku away. He'd never stand a chance. But then why did he get his license without even taking the exam that Bakugo felt short on? He let out a cry of frustration, spinning around to punch him right in the side of his damaged face. Flashes of it disintegrating before his eyes came to the forefront of his mind, but they were quickly dispersed when Deku grabbed his flying fist. In a movement that Mr. Aizawa had most certainly not cared to teach them yet, small, weak, pitiful Deku tossed Bakugo right over his shoulder. He collided with the floor, the mat providing zero comfort as the wind was knocked out of him in a painful blow. The entire class stopped and stared. Bakugo was blinking at the ceiling again, the shock barely registering.
All right.
Mr. Aizawa's voice cut through the tension as thick and heavy as Bakugo's thoughts.
Class is over. Leave the mats where they are. Class B will be using them in a few minutes.
Bakugo gritted his teeth again as he hauled himself up to a sitting position. His eyes zeroed in on Deku, standing over him and looking down, his hand held out to him. There was only one thing Bakugo could say, forcing the words past the rising lump in his throat.
Back the freak off! I don't need your help!
He was stronger than this. He was stronger than him. So why did everything seem to prove him wrong?
Get changed quickly,
Mr. Aizawa insisted, handing the bird over to Deku.
Midnight has complained to me too many times about you lot being late for her class after hero lessons.
Bakugo stood up, averting his gaze from everyone else's as he shoved his hands in his pockets, marching out of the hall and back towards school. He intended to finish changing first, in an attempt to finish this day as quickly as possible. However, that didn't seem to work out because now at the door to Class 1A, everyone else was already sitting inside, paying just as much attention as usual to Miss Midnight's lesson. As soon as she saw Bakugo arriving, she pulled out the whip that came with her hero costume and pointed it menacingly in his direction. "Everyone else got here on time," she exclaimed in clear frustration. Bakugo didn't bother saying anything in reply as he weaved through the desks toward his own. His footsteps echoed in his ears, the world slowing as he caught Deku's gaze. For a moment, he was back in middle school, passing Deku's desk as he wandered towards his. The boy would avert his eyes immediately, slouching and ducking his head, burying it in a book. But at UA, things were different. Deku held his stare, green eyes more piercing than he ever thought they could be. He did not slouch. He did not quiver in fear, nor duck his head. Bakugo could still feel his eyes on him as he sat down in the desk in front of him, digging into the back of his head. They remained like that for the rest of the day. At least it felt like they did. For all Bakugo knew, he'd stopped as soon as Bakugo sat down. But it didn't feel like that. Art came and went, and maths did too, not long after. As soon as they finished, Bakugo shoved his things into his bag, slung it over his shoulder, and stormed out of the classroom. As he walked to the dorms, weird hair caught up with him. "Hey man, you okay?" he panted, clearly having run to reach him. But Bakugo didn't reply. He didn't even look at Kirishima and just kept moving forwards. "You've been acting weird all afternoon," Kirishima continued, not taking the hint that Bakugo would rather not be talking at the moment. "Ever since your spar with Canary." "Stupid Canary. What a weird name. Why does everyone call him that?" "Look, a lot of stuff happened, and Canary hasn't been doing too great either," said Kirishima. "It's alright for you to not be either. You don't have to act like everything's okay, you know? It's not a sign of weakness. The strongest of them all are the ones that have the will to admit that they're not okay."
"Everything's fine, okay?"
Bakugo snapped as they reached the doors to Heights Alliance. Kirishima hesitated behind him, holding the straps of his backpack uncertainly. "Well, if you ever need to talk—"
"I don't! Get off my back!"
He snarled, kicked off his shoes, and stormed up to his room. He got changed quickly, not caring where he threw his crumpled uniform. Then, with little debate, he fell onto his bed, muffling his face in his pillows to block out the evening light. Eventually, he rolled over and found himself staring at the ceiling. Why was he like this? Why did someone as weak as Deku manage to pull ahead of him despite having gone through everything Bakugo had? And worse. Why? And how could he put it right? Midoriya's mom teared up as soon as she saw him at the gates of UA. Siren seemed just as pleased to see her as Midoriya was, announcing her presence to the world very loudly while she claimed her space upon Midoriya's head as he hugged his tearful mother. "Oh, Izuku!" she exclaimed. "I'm sorry about yesterday. I would have talked with you about your provisional license over the phone, but we both know why that wouldn't have been possible, and it all happened so quickly, and I..." Midoriya just laughed. There was so much going on all of a sudden. Siren was still yelling, his mother was mumbling as bad as he apparently did, and the Mr. Aizawa was just standing aside indifferently holding Eri by the hand as she blinked at the reunion in apparent confusion. "What?" Inko stammered, dabbing her eyes with the hanky she pulled from her cardigan's pocket.
Due to the situation, we'd rather we didn't have your son wandering the streets so soon after getting his license,
Mr. Aizawa explained.
which is why you've been allowed access to the school for a few hours to talk about it all.
"Thank you," Midoriya's mom replied. "I'm sorry I wasn't very helpful over the phone yesterday," she repeated.
It's understandable.
Mr. Aizawa shrugged.
Your son was attacked by one of the villains who took him to begin with. Granted, he dealt with it extremely well.
His explanation was quickly interrupted by Inko blowing her nose very loudly, by which point she had finally noticed Eri, who gazed up at her with wondering eyes. "Hello there," Inko sniffed, crouching down to her height. "Is this your daughter?"
Aizawa stiffened at the suggestion, which made Midoriya hold back another laugh. No, this is Eri. She is the little girl who Midoriya saved when he escaped from the villains.
And now she was welling up again. "Hi," she stammered, gazing at Eri with a wobbly smile upon her face.
We need to have a talk with the police about her quirk,
Mr. Aizawa explained, looking at Midoriya as he did so, making it clear who he was speaking to.
I'll be taking her back to Heights Alliance afterwards whilst I go on my hero patrol.
Midoriya nodded in understanding. Eri felt most comfortable around Midoriya than anyone else. Apparently, she asked for him often, preferring his presence to Mr. Aizawa's or any of the other teachers.
You can wander around the school or take your mother back to the dorms,
Mr. Aizawa explained, handing the visitor's pass over to Inko as he said so.
Miss Midoriya, your pass lasts until 6 o'clock.
"Thank you," she said again, sniffing loudly as she crumpled up the hanky and shoved it back in her pocket. And so they waved goodbye, Eri a little reluctantly, and Midoriya led his mother on a roundabout tour of the school. They walked in silence for a good majority of their time together, arm in arm, gazing at the world around them. They were used to that. Midoriya very often would just sit with his mother, neither uttering a word, but taking relish in each other's company. But something had clearly been weighing on her mind and soon spilled out into the open. "That girl, Eri, how did you find her?" Midoriya pulled his hand away from hers. "She ran into me," he started, unsure how to phrase all this in the best way possible for his mother. "The day before hadn't been great. I'd met a horrible villain, and it was him that Eri was running from. Whilst the villains were fighting amongst each other, I took her and ran." Inko whimpered and hugged him tightly once more. She was a lot shorter than him now, he noticed. Siren had at some point transferred from his head to his mom's, so now he was staring at her whilst his mom embraced him. She let out a quick chirp of acknowledgement as Inko pulled away again. "You're so brave," she whispered, rubbing her eyes as they finally approached Heights Alliance. "I'm so sorry, Izuku." "There's nothing to be sorry about, Mom." But he didn't think she saw the sign through her blurry vision. "I don't like you being here," she admitted. "I don't like you having a provisional hero license or being a hero at all. I just want you to be safe. But little Eri, she wouldn't be safe without you. You saved her. And Izuku, I'm so proud of you." Midoriya's hand was hovering above the doorknob to Heights Alliance. And now he was going to cry!
Oh, hey, Miss Midoriya.
That was Shinzo, who must have seen the two of them from the window and opened the door before Midoriya could burst into tears.
Nice to see you.
"You too, Shinzo," Inko replied, giving him a hug despite his usual awkwardness about it. He also got a sudden face full of Siren.
There's a bird on your head,
he acknowledged, not noticing Midoriya furiously rubbing his eyes. "Oh, is there really?" she asked, trying to peer up at Siren. How did she get there? She can't fly. Midoriya shrugged as he took her back. You just had to accept it when it came to Siren.
Are you coming in?
Shinso questioned. She seemed hesitant. Oh, for a minute or so then. He pushed the door open a little wider and hurried ahead of the two of them back inside.
Guys, Midoriya's mom's here.
Mom Midoriya! Uraraka exclaimed from across the common area. She leapt to her feet and ran over whilst Midoriya took off his shoes. Hi, I'm Uraraka! Dove, on the radio! So good to meet you, she smiled, gazing around at all the people in her son's new class. This is Ida! He's Crane! Uraraka continued.
And I still do not see how that name relates to me,
he exclaimed, chopping his hands through the air in frustration. And Todoroki over there is Puffin!
Uraraka came up with all the names.
Shinso whispered to Midoriya's mom, causing her to chuckle as the bumbling girl continued to bounce around the room. This is Jiro! She's Owl! Jiro waved, glancing up from her books as Inko said, You have a lovely voice. I heard you on the radio.
She blushed furiously as Midoriya and Shinso stifled their laughter in the background. She shot them a look.
You have such good friends, Izuku, Inko whispered to him whilst Uraraka continued to enthusiastically introduce her to absolutely everyone, bird names or no, until... And then, this is Bakugo!
From behind his mom, Midoriya gave Uraraka a look. No, 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 no!
Oh, hello, Katsuki.
Everyone stared. Kajan didn't look up from his phone as he replied, Hey, Auntie Inko.
Midoriya's expression must have been a sight to behold because Shinso snorted and Jiro was trying so hard not to laugh that she was shaking in her seat, her face hidden in her maths book. Oh, I haven't seen you in ages. You and Izuku didn't talk very much in middle school. Nice to see you again.
Was all Kajan said in reply. Well, one of the only benefits of not being able to talk is the excuse to not involve yourself. Then again, Kajan could really have given that interaction a little more effort. When he finally glanced in Midoriya's direction, he gave him a rather frustrated gesture as if to say, Seriously? Are you kidding me? Midoriya quickly dropped the look as his mother turned around again, resorting to his usual happy smile as Inko wandered back towards him.
I should get going, Izuku. I don't want to intrude any longer, but you have to actually message me when these things happen again, she insisted. Midoriya nodded frantically, his eyes vaguely keeping an eye on Kacchan when he casually gave him the middle finger. The gesture was hidden again when Inko turned around to wave goodbye, and the only reason that the childish silent argument ended there and then was because Midoriya had to hurriedly pull his shoes back on to accompany Inko back to the UA gates. Midoriya was still considering how everyone would have reacted if he returned the gesture to Kacchan. Not that he ever would, but still. You really do have such nice friends, Inko sniffed as they reached the main entrance to the school. And it's so nice to see you and Katsuki getting along again. He forced a smile, although she didn't realize how fake it was. Although it was harder to tell when his mask covered it up. I'll see you again soon, Izuku, she said after one last hug. And please, try not to get into any more trouble. My heart can't take it anymore. Midoriya nodded sincerely, and with a final wave, the two parted ways and Midoriya hurried all the way back to Heights Alliance. Just give him a break, was the sound that Midoriya heard as he hesitated by the door. He pressed his ear against it as carefully and quietly as he could. Two of his class did have superhuman hearing after all. I didn't friggin' do anything! Kacchan's voice exclaimed in response. His mother was here and you were swearing at him over her shoulder, Shinso yelled. Oh dear, this wouldn't end well. Midoriya decided that hanging around behind the closed door wouldn't do much, so he cautiously opened it. The others were all around the corner. He tossed off his shoes as the arguing continued and then wandered cautiously toward them. Auntie? Inko? Jiro scoffed. I know you were childhood friends, but come on! To be fair, didn't Canary once call you Kacchan? Questioned Kirishima. And you called him... what was it? Deku?
That's kinda sweet,
added Mina with a giggle. The name Deku means useless,
Shinso interjected harshly.
forgot.
Mina mumbled.
She forgot! Midoriya frowned, still slightly out of sight. Why did she forget? Surely she didn't know about this before. The only one who knew about that was Shinso.
We should stop arguing about him when he's not here, Ribbit.
As we pointed out,
It goes wrong every time.
Midoriya narrowed his eyes. This had happened before. He took this moment to come into view. Oh, there you are! Arabaka exclaimed once she saw him, cutting the conversation short. But the bewildered expression was still on Midoriya's face. He glanced between all of them, reading the awkward looks on their own. Raven, what were you talking about? Midoriya signed to Shinso uncertainly.
Just Bakugo being Bakugo.
Oh, shut up! He hissed. That's not what I meant! Midoriya continued, stepping a little closer. He caught Koda's eye as he signed, aware that he understood the movements too. What did you tell them whilst I was gone?
Today? Shinso frowned. Like I said, we were just talking about...
Me! Midoriya glared. It wasn't just the noise that made everyone flinch, but the venomous look in his bright green eyes. What happened whilst I was with the villains?
When you were... with the villains,
He repeated slowly. There was a moment of silence between them all before Kachan butted in. He spilled all the rubbish about me that you said to him! He snarled. On the first night in the dorms. A brilliant start! Midoriya stared at Shinso in disbelief. He told him those things in confidence. Did he really spill some of his deepest, darkest secrets to the entire class?
I lost my cool, okay?
Shinso stammered.
You weren't there. He was being an utter...
Does Tired know?
Mr. Aizawa? No one knows that side of 1A. Midoriya, it's not that bad. It's okay.
Canary, she just wanted to help. Kirishima stepped in. We understand, and we won't talk about it ever again if you don't want us to. We get it. It's totally not manly. We're sorry. Midoriya wasn't sure how he felt. Yeah, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing that everyone knew. At least not for him. But it was for Kachan. Midoriya didn't want Kachan's past to compromise his future. He would make a great hero despite what he used to be. Despite not passing the provisional licensing exam. Despite everything. Tired is bringing Bluebird up later. Midoriya sighed, hanging his head. Tell her I'll be in my room.
Wait, Midoriya!
Shinso called out, but Midoriya didn't reply, fiddling with his hands absent-mindedly as he walked up the stairs to his room, ignoring the calls behind him. You really do have such nice friends, and it's so nice to see you and Katsuki getting along again. Yeah, if only.